Hello, I'm MARCIA KAVANAUGH. Thanks so much for joining us. Both the Mississippi State Bulldogs and the state legislature head to Baton Rouge this week. Neither are expected to draw a crowd, though the football game would be packed with fans if it could be. The lawmakers will not even have the governor cheering for them. We will examine those stories tonight, plus what was learned from a newspaper series about industrial pollution and the lessons from Hurricanes Laura and Sally. And we will also take a look at a council member who lives a very public life and consequently the number of coronavirus victims that he has known to date. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. ERROL LABORDE, producer of Informed Sources. Jessica Williams, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Tyler Bridges, reporter of the Times-Picayune, New Orleans Advocate, and Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter with the Picayune and Advocate. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys. We're going to go first over, though, to ERROL, just for the update on COVID. What's the latest?
Well, three things. Based on yesterday's figures, as you'd expect, the three most populous parishes have the highest number of cases. Jefferson Parish has 17,400, East Baton Rouge 15,000, and Orleans 12,500. Interestingly, even though Orleans trails Jefferson Parish by 5,000 number of the cases, Orleans is first, not by much, but first in the number of deaths. Orleans has 587, Jefferson had 567, and East Baton Rouge 439. Now, in the week, a couple of things that will be happening in the next few days that I think people could be watching. One is that the administration has been signaling that they're going to talk about the Phase 3 rules and maybe loosen up on some things.
The city administration you're talking about, Orleans.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the city administration, New Orleans, and about easing up. The speculation is easing up on some of the rules, maybe as far as the bars, which is really, bars are a big deal in Orleans Parish. It's not just people getting a drink, but I mean, so much part of the economy, like in the French Quarter and all that is based on that. And so maybe they'll do that, but there's talk that by the end of the week, they're going to have some new guidelines. There is some pressure to try to loosen up. Whether or not it's going to happen, but that'll be something to be looking to. There's also speculation that they might say, okay, we're doing Phase 3 except for this part, that they may delay parts of Phase 3 and would put elements of it in. But the other thing is actually what we're going to learn from two football games. The LSU game, LSU has its first game, and they're going to do distancing. And when you get a 100,000 seat stadium and you do the kind of distancing, it comes down to 25,000 people. And so they're going to allow 25,000 people, which for LSU is next to nothing, but it's more than what they've had in the past. And so it's going to be a bit of an experiment to see how it works, just cutting down the size, but still having the people. If you've watched any football games and you've heard the artificial sound that's brought in, and in the NFL it's got to be 70 decibels, it really starts to sound phony in a hurry. So it's going to be refreshing to hear real people. The Saints, on the other hand, have a game Sunday night. And again, the rules still apply in Orleans Parish. They're going to allow, there's supposed to be 750 people who are like friends of the Saints, so people who are, know the players and know the players' families. And they're part of an experiment too, just to see how it works. So you have 750 people at the Saints game, which is unheard of, and 25,000 LSU game, which is unheard of, but two small crowds. But at least it's a first step. And so maybe we can start seeing some sort of movement for the rest of the season with the other teams. And so the two things to watch out is the new position, if any, from City Hall in New Orleans, and what is learned from these football game seating arrangements.
In Jefferson Parish, are they opening up bars a little bit more?
Yeah, the council had a meeting, and they want to open it up more. I mean, there's still a lot of restrictions there. And Orleans Parish just wants to do the same, too. So,
okay. Well, I mean, it all depends upon the numbers. So we'll just keep an eye on it. Thanks a lot, E. And Jessica, over to you. And a real personal story. I mean, we've just been talking about stats and numbers, but it does come down to people. And Councilman Jay Banks really has some personal stories to tell about this.
He does, and Councilmember Banks has been involved in the community in New Orleans for a number of years. He's super active in social organizations, with the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, with his fraternity, with community organizations such as the Dryades YMCA. And so for him, really experiencing this virus has really been a personal experience for him. he has lost a total of 17 people to this disease, people who are, his longtime friends, someone who, all the way dating back to college days, he was close with, his childhood friends, people who grew up around the corner from his house in the city's, the 13th ward in that area. And he's really, really relied on this story and just his personal experience and really wanted to tell this story because he was hoping that it would cause people to take this virus a little more seriously than they have. And that's what we talked about over the course of about 2 weeks that I spent in an initial interview with him, but then also tracking down the family members of several of the 17 people that he says that he lost to this disease. And it was really eye-opening because so often we hear the numbers from City Hall, 587 as of today, but it can feel distant if you don't particularly know anyone who has passed away from the disease, or if you don't know anyone who's been sickened by it or had, had to go into the hospital because of it. So often we hear about this from the perspective of folks who have lost revenue because of it. But there is a human side, and that's what he wanted to tell.
A real human side, a real human toll. So in talking to the families who have lost their loved ones, what did you learn? What did you find out from them?
I think the thing that really hit home for me was just how quickly the disease struck in a lot of cases. These were people who, middle-aged, older, some were younger, but no one really anticipated that the virus would hit as swiftly and as, just dangerously as it did. I mean, there were folks who, in one case, this was Jay Banks's fraternity brother and also a former king of the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. He was diagnosed of COVID on March 21st. By March 31st, he was gone. And it was just rapid. It was like, and we've heard this before. We've heard the experts say, particularly for residents who have underlying conditions such as diabetes, such as asthma, congestive heart failure, these are the types of things that can lead to really rapid worsening of this disease. And we've also understand that it does tend to hit the Black community disproportionately. But that doesn't mean that other communities are immune. If we look at the state numbers, it is a disproportionate effect on the African-American community in terms of deaths. But there still are, it's still the majority of folks who are getting this and who are dying from it that are white. But it's just because disproportionately there's a lower population of Black residents in the state. We're seeing this really impact them and hit them in a hard way. And the reasons for that, like I mentioned, the underlying conditions, but also a tendency for some African-American folks in the city to work in the tourism industry, which allows you to be or requires you to be public facing, just dealing with folks, all the time. Riding public transportation means that you don't, if you don't have a car, you're around other people when you go to work. Right. A host of reasons really that have caused this to really affect the African-American community. And that was one of the things that he really wanted to highlight in talking with me for this piece.
And that it's real. We just wanted to get that message across.
Yeah, I mean, he said, in the interview with me, there were people that he talked to, of either race or all ethnicities who were just like, whatever. I'm tired of being inside. I'm going to go have this party for my granddaughter. And I'm not concerned about this anymore because enough is enough. And then talking with people on the other side who have lost revenue from this, who are business owners, African-American and white, all races, who just are kind of sick of seeing this, because again, it hits you when you have someone who's close to you who has been impacted by it, or if you yourself have been impacted by it. But that doesn't make it any less real for the people that are fighting this and dealing with this.
All right. And it was a really poignant, powerful piece that you wrote about Councilman Banks. So thanks a lot, Jessica, for sharing that with us. Tyler, over to you. And the legislators of Louisiana have called themselves in the special session. Why is this happening?
Well, the stated reason is to deal with the state's unemployment trust fund, which is nearly out of money, and also to deal with Hurricane Laura, which hit the Lake Charles area and other parts of the state. But my reporting tells me that really the biggest reason is that this conservative Republican legislature wants to try to clip some of the powers of the governor through the executive orders that he has issued for this public health emergency.
And so, can they do that? Number one, I mean, the governor has said that, he has the power to do that, and this is a public health issue, and this is why he's issued these orders. Can the legislators take some of that power away?
Yeah, well, there's a dispute between the administration and legislators. What folks are going to be hearing about in the coming days is about a petition drive or petition drives by Republican legislators. They're citing a 2003 law that allows one chamber of the legislature, of the surviving members of the legislature, to, if they get a majority of signatures of that chamber, then to terminate the state's public health emergency law that a governor would issue. Now, I spoke to an expert who knew the passage of this law back in 2003, noting the language about survivable, said that this petition was originally, the language creating this law was originally anticipated in a situation where a pandemic caused deaths of scores of legislators and maybe the governor. But conservative legislators are trying to use this petition, and they haven't been able to get enough signatures yet to force the governor's hand to give them a greater say in whether to extend these emergency powers. And not having gotten enough signatures on that, because the Edwards administration is worrying that if they do terminate that, the governor's emergency declaration, that would lead to a cutoff in all sorts of federal aid. So the special session appears to be Plan B.
So, okay, go ahead, Errol.
Yeah,
was that you?
that's on the other issue, the one about the hurricane in southwest Louisiana. Last month, the state was already in big financial trouble. Now it has a hurricane to deal with. Is the state capable or able to deal with that? And where's the money going to come from?
Well, yeah, and that's why it's a bit confusing about why they've cited Hurricane Laura as an important reason for the special session. The one issue they do want to address is that the so-called MFP, which allocates education funding throughout the state, there's a count of students throughout the state in October, and there's the fear in parishes of Cameron, Calcasieu, and Beauregard that they will be undercounted with the number of students they have, and then they won't get all the state aid they need. So one of the issues they do want to address is to make sure that everybody gets their fair share of the money, even with the folks being displaced, the students being displaced.
Also, real quick, Tyler, what about unemployment money?
Well, the state unemployment law is just the fund is just about out of money. The state is now going to be borrowing money from the federal government. The benefits will continue to flow, but that has to do with sort of a complex trigger law in the state that would require a surcharge on how much employers have to pay in taxes and a cut in benefits to begin to replenish that fund. So they want to come up with something to prevent those from taking effect.
How long will the special session go on?
It's 30 days. The governor thinks it really should just be a couple weeks, and it's overly broad. But again, I think what we're going to be reading about in the coming days are fights between efforts by the conservative legislators to try to strip away some of the powers that the governor has to issue orders with for the public health emergency. The Republican conservatives they're hearing from their constituents that this is the governor has been trampling on individual rights and taking moves that have led to the failure of businesses. So these members want to show that that they should have a voice and show their constituents that they are concerned about what's happening.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tyler. So it begins Monday. We'll be looking for it. Thanks a lot. Mark, over to you. I mean, we dodged it, fortunately, 2 hurricanes, Laura and Sally, but they had tremendous impact on portions of the southwest portion of our state, and then, of course, in the Gulf Coast. We saw these storms kind of dance around, weren't quite sure where they were going. What caused this, and how would we have been impacted if we did get them? Mark, I'm not hearing Mark.
No.
Mark? We can't hear you. We want to hear what you're saying. Can we maybe see if we can adjust that and come back to Mark? Yeah. Okay, Mark, keep working on it. We'll come back to you. Tyler, you mind if I jump back to you right now? We have Tyler there, right? And another big issue facing us, I mean, everybody across the country right now, is the United States Supreme Court, of course, with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, notorious RBG.
Yeah.
We have a seat now that needs to be filled. So, yeah, big controversy about it. But on the short list is a Metairie native. Tell us about her.
Yeah, Louisiana has only had one Supreme Court justice, and that was about 100 years ago. And so now Amy Coney Barrett is a name people are beginning to hear, and we may be hearing a lot more about her in the coming days if the president does indeed choose her as his choice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court.
And tell us a little bit about it, about Amy Coney
She's
Barrett.
48. Yeah, she's 48 years old. She went to Dominican High School in New Orleans as a devout Catholic. And she has been of late she was a professor at the University of Notre Dame Law School, and then was named an appellate court judge up in Indiana. Something we're going to hear a lot about, I'm thinking, in the coming days. Again, if the president does indeed nominate her, is an organization, a religious organization that she and her family and her parents have belonged to, called People of Praise. Mm-hmm. And this might be an organization that the Democrats would go after her to suggest that this organization, conservative Christian group, mm-hmm. Is out of the mainstream. But she is a woman who is indeed a local. And I know some folks in her family, and they're very proud of her. And I think they're fearful about what this nomination process could be like if she indeed gets the nomination.
So we will find out, supposedly this weekend is when the president said he's going to let us know who his nominee is. If someone like Judge Barrett is named, because she is an appeals court judge presently, right?
Right, and she checks a lot of important boxes for President Trump and Republicans. Again, she is a devout Catholic, appears to be a strong anti-abortion person. The first two appointees that the president named to the Supreme Court were men, so it seems like it's time for a woman. So she checks that box as well. At 48 years old, she could be on the Supreme Court for decades, and in fact, if she is as conservative as many people hope, she would probably end up erasing Justice Ginsburg's record on the bench as well.
Okay, so we'll wait and see, because it's not for certain that she will be the nominee, but I mean, she had been vetted before for this appeals court process, and they're trying to speed up the nomination and confirmation process for the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. That's Marcia is another important point, because so she's already gone through the background check when she was confirmed by the Senate in 2017. So that then diminishes the amount of time that they need to do to go through the background check if she's nominated again this time. And presumably any major skeletons would have already been uncovered. So she would be seen as a safe choice that she could get through the Senate at a very complicated time right now.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tyler. We're going to go back over to Mark right now, and hopefully we'll be able to hear him. Are you there?
I hope you can.
Oh, yes, we can, because we want to hear what you have to say. I mean, hurricanes always perk up our ears. So,
I know.
Like I was saying before, we watched Laura and Sally do this little dance in the Gulf. They avoided us. So kind of tell us what happened there, and about how does climate change fit into that, and how would we have handled 30 inches of rain?
Sure. So let's talk about the season first. It's been a very, very active season. There are natural reasons for that. We entered into this pattern of more active seasons in 1995, and it's continued until today. The question is, are we now seeing a continuation of this pattern beyond when it should have because of climate change, global warming? And the thing that could cause that is increased temperatures of sea surface across the world, which are definitely happening. So that's one thing that we have to worry about. So for this year, we've seen 3 storms, really. Laura was the first. It was a storm that was sort of a traditional storm. It cut across the Gulf of Mexico fairly quickly, but blew up went through what's called rapid intensification when it hit warm water, and the winds at the top of the storm disappeared, and it was able to literally spin up like a top and become this 150-mile-an-hour behemoth that came ashore in Cameron Parish. Now, when it came ashore, people were saying, oh, my God, it's going to be terrible. It's going to have a 20-foot-high storm surge. And then all of a sudden, it came in maybe 20 miles to the east of where it was originally supposed to go. And so the storm surge was, quote, only 10 feet high. Well, 10 feet high is still higher than you or me by half, and a wave of water coming in that high causes significant damage. And then if you just go 20 miles to the east of it, in Cameron Parish, there were houses there that have water lines that were 18 feet above sea level. So that 20-foot-high surge did happen. It didn't get all the way to Lake Charles. What happened in Lake Charles was wind, and this was a huge storm, and it's caused a huge amount of damage, and we're still trying to figure out what's going on. Now, with Sally, the problem was that we had a...
Can I let Errol jump in? Because I know he wanted to say something.
Nothing to say. On the day before the storm hit Southwest Louisiana, watching the weather coverage, like with the Weather Channel, the predictions were really, really dire about that storm surge. Everybody was talking about that, and they were saying things, look at this picture, look at this land, tomorrow it won't be the same again. I mean, people were really seeing a major catastrophe, so it was almost a sense of victory that had moved over a little bit.
Well, except it's not. And if you look at what happened in Cameron Parish, the majority of homes that were built there after Hurricane Rita are pretty much damaged significantly. So it's really not true. The problem is that people didn't get down there and do decent aerial views of what was going on. So now we get to Sally, and Sally was a different kind of a storm. It was a storm, one of this new pattern that seems to be popping up of storms affected by climate change from the slowing of the jet stream and the differences that have occurred there. And this one also was hard to determine where it was going to go in. It ended up moving slowly but surely to the east of where it was supposed to go. Fortunately, it didn't come over us. Where it did go, in Pensacola, you had 30 inches of rain. So if this storm had come over New Orleans, the problem would have been that you would have had 30 inches of rain over 12 to maybe 18 hours, and the New Orleans, city of New Orleans drainage system most certainly could not have handled that. So there would have been major flooding in the city from rainfall. That storm itself would have produced probably maybe 7 or 8 feet of storm surge, not enough to be a worry in terms of the new New Orleans levee system, and indeed it wasn't afterwards. But the rainfall would have been significant, and whether or not our pumping system was all working, which most of it was, I think there was maybe one of the pumps that wasn't working properly at the time, it would have overwhelmed the drainage system.
So fortunately, that one had missed us as well. But these heavy rain totals are really something to behold. Okay, let me get you to shift gears a little bit, and let's talk a bit about, first off, congratulations due to you and your colleagues about a series you did last week regarding pollution.
Right. So the series we did last year, that's okay, it was an attempt to look at the record of Louisiana state agencies that are supposed to be acting as stewards of the state's fragile environment, beginning with a story and interactive graphic that looked at how all of these planned petrochemical facilities would increase, that are going to be built over the next couple of years, would increase what are already significant air quality problems in some of the state's already most polluted parishes along the Mississippi River. We also looked at other lax regulatory programs, including the state's failure to hold oil companies responsible for oil spills. For instance, There were more than 500 oil spills during Hurricane Katrina and Rita, and the state has yet to require payments for cleanups or natural resource damages from most of those 15 years later. And then more recently, looking back at the chemical plants along the river, we did a story about how hazarded air pollutants, the most hazarded one of those chemicals that are in the air from those plants, are linked to increased death rates from COVID. And that was backed up by a peer-reviewed national study of that link that was done by researchers at the State University of New York and by ProPublica, which was the organization that partnered with us in doing this series.
Well, very respected series, and once again, you guys received 2 awards for that, so congratulations to you. It's time now for a round table. And what other stories this week? Errol, let's go to you first.
Well, actually, we're going to look back a little bit. Today is the 231st anniversary of the establishment of the First Amendment, which is, we know it best for creating a freedom of the press. However, the amendment in its original form called for freedom of assembly and petition, and that was the first draft. And then by the time the final draft came, they said, hey, let's add a couple of things to it. Let's add freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of press. And still, 231 years later, the freedom of the press is covering freedom of assembly.
And ever so important, too. Thanks a lot, E. Jessica, over to you.
As we project whether or not we're going to move into phase 3, several organizations within the past few weeks have talked about how difficult phase 2 has been for them financially, among them Audubon Institute and more recently City Park. And we'll be seeing some more on that in the coming days.
All right, thanks. Tyler, to you.
Yeah, just a clue to viewers again about the special session that begins Monday night, and that will last as long as a month. I think it's important for folks to try to clue in as to what the legislators and the governor are going to be trying to do during that time. Again, particularly involving the powers of the governor, also something about the state's unemployment trust fund and some other issues.
All right, thanks a lot. Mark, you.
Sure. So next week, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority will be looking at what happened during the hurricanes and storms that occurred this year along our coast, what effects it had on wetlands in particular, and especially to projects that the state either has or has planned. Okay. And one of the things that they are going to be especially looking at is the potential for future elevation or moving of homes that are in flood areas, especially in Cameron.
A very important issue. All right. Thanks a lot. We're out of time now. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.